My regards, friends. Welcome to my channel. I am Alexander Musienko. So German Chancellor Friedrich Merz stated that the West has allowed Ukraine to strike Russian territory with long-range weapons. We're talking about Germany, France, Britain, and the United States of America. I immediately had an association. You know, this has already become a meme and a classic, but this has already happened, right? Quoting one of Ukraine's presidents, Leonid Danilovich Kuchma, I think you remember. By the way, this phrase actually came from when Kuchma was scolding Yanukovych. For those who don't remember, the situation was like this. Why are you reading this to us? We've heard that before. And here, by the way, the analogies are actually appropriate because we've already heard that the United States of America and Britain allowed Ukraine to use their weapons. The same applied to France and also to Germany when it came to protecting the civilian population, especially in the Kharkiv and Sumy regions, when Russia was attacking from its own territory and carrying out terrorist attacks. So what could be different now? It would seem that everything is the same. But the next question is weapons. That is, the point is that we can strike, but with what are we supposed to strike? And this is the most crucial, the most important point, because right now, obviously, our European partners are working on procuring weapons. Already in the United States, they are saying that they don't want to just hand over the Patriot system. They are now saying that they are ready to sell it. Well, if it's to be sold, then so be it. I think we need to look for ways. Moreover, Ukraine has never refused to buy. I want to remind you of the words of the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky, who clearly stated that we are ready to buy as long as the United States is willing to sell. Judging by everything, such an agreement exists, and in principle we can now afford to strengthen our air defense shield. After all, well, again, you know, I've said that I don't really like this topic, but since it's already out there on social media, since it's already in the media, Telegram channels and so on, about whether we lack SAM-T systems, missiles for them or other means. Plus, we see that the Shaheds are changing their technical parameters. By the way, there's nothing surprising about this, because the enemy is constantly trying to modify the flight paths of their drones. They are now using artificial intelligence more actively to change these parameters. All of this is well known. They use mobile communication towers on the territory of Ukraine. This is also a well-known fact. So, essentially, nothing particularly new or unusual is happening. But frankly speaking, we do need reinforcement. This is already obvious. I myself, in certain areas on the territory of Ukraine, actually observe and hear when Shaheds are incoming, and it's necessary to respond to them more actively. Perhaps it's because they fly at high altitude. Sometimes there aren't enough missiles and so on. But the work will continue, so it's necessary here. But the Taurus missiles remain an intrigue, because this is being announced by Friedrich Merz, the German Chancellor, while Volodymyr Zelensky, the President of Ukraine, is planning to visit Germany this week precisely to discuss the issue of the further negotiation process with Russia, which is actually hard to imagine, and, in particular, to discuss the issue of armaments. And yes, of course, Germany is currently classifying its arms packages. There are two versions as to why they are doing this. One version is that Germany simply does not want to disclose or give any hints to Russia regarding the nomenclature, volumes, quantities, and exactly what they are transferring. There is another version which says that they simply do not want to declassify the supply of Taurus in this way. They want to keep the Taurus secret. And then there's a third version. Sorry, I didn't mention it right away, but that makes three versions in total. Because the third version is that, on the contrary, they are keeping quiet about the Taurus. They don't want to say when the Taurus, the long-range German missiles, might be supplied to Ukraine. A particular feature of the Taurus missiles is that they are produced by a company that competes with the manufacturers of the French-made Scalp and G systems, as well as the Storm Shadow. Storm Shadow is a missile equipped with stealth technology, which means it is quite effective at penetrating enemy air defense systems, even layered ones, and accordingly can strike targets, including well-fortified ones such as bunkers and more, In fact, the Taurus can do this as well. The only thing is that they have some technical differences. And as is generally indicated by, let's say, the theoretical developments currently presented in the West, including by German engineers, designers, and specialists, the Taurus is actually even better at this. So when we talk about, excuse me, I'm still recovering, but I promise everything will be fine. So when we talk about what Military Watch magazine or other Western publications are now writing, that Russia is amassing 50,000 troops in the Kursk and Belgorod regions and is planning to intensify and escalate offensive operations in the Kharkiv and Sumy regions. Right now, we're seeing the same patterns and coincidences as we did back when the West first gave permission to strike Russian territory. At that time, it was directly related to Russia's plans to expand the buffer zone in the Kharkiv region, as they were planning an offensive operation aimed at a partial encirclement or potentially in the future a full encirclement of Kharkiv. And that's when we received missiles. Now we're seeing a very similar situation. So it's very interesting. I think this visit will be significant in many ways. And eventually we will find out whether Friedrich Merz, the current German Chancellor, will adhere to Olaf Scholz's doctrine, or if he will be braver, bolder, more decisive, and finally dare to provide Ukraine with the much-needed Taurus missiles. Because the challenges are not going anywhere. And for perhaps the first time we saw an interview with the head of the Foreign Intelligence Service of Ukraine. Perhaps many of you didn't even realize that there is such an intelligence agency in Ukraine, because we all know about the outstanding operations of the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense, interviews with the head of the main intelligence directorate, Kirilo Budanov, and many of his quotes, but we hear less about the Foreign Intelligence Service, which has recently become quite a bit more active. They publish reports, posts on social media, on their own pages, and are actively conducting surveillance. And now Ivashchenko, the head of this agency, says that there are no signs indicating that Russia is ready to end the war. And this is the very purpose of the current Russian state's existence, because otherwise everything will shift to domestic politics. Ivashchenko confirms that in Russia, decisions are made by Putin and no one can contradict him. This is what I talk about in my videos. It doesn't matter what the Kremlin lackeys like Zakharova, Medvedev or others say, whether they're rambling after a drink or drawing up buffer zones, whatever they might claim. The only thing that matters is what Putin says or what Putin's doubles say. But again, it's Putin himself who tells the doubles what they need to say. There's absolutely no doubt about that. That's why he alone makes the decisions. Ivashchenko also mentions that the Russian National Wealth Fund is being depleted. And basically, by the end of this year, Russia will be facing serious economic difficulties and problems. Basically, the same point of view is held by Kirilo Budanov, the head of the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense, who has spoken about this before. So in this matter, our intelligence community has a consolidated, unified, and similar position. In addition, the head of the Foreign Intelligence Service noted that Russia is actively being assisted by China and North Korea. And that one of the reasons why Russia wants to continue fighting is because it is investing huge amounts from its own budget into domestic production and modernization of weaponry. And since the military-industrial complex is currently a priority sector for the economy, it is obvious that many Russian officials and oligarchs have started making money from it. And accordingly, they are not going to give up this cash cow. So, in addition to political, military, and aggressive motives, there are also economic factors and clear financial calculations on the enemy's side. This is exactly what guides them. However, it should be noted that by the end of the year, Russia could be hit by a serious crisis, an economic one. Our task is to hold out so that nothing hits us first, to repel attacks, and in principle, to maintain ties with the West. This is very important. Emmanuel Macron, the French president, said that, in his opinion, Trump will now definitely be disappointed in Putin and will see that the Russian dictator truly does not want any ceasefire or peace. I'm not so sure. I don't really share the viewpoint of the French President Macron here. But in the end, we'll see. This is an important, crucial week because it will show whether Friedrich Merz and Germany will dare to provide us with Taurus missiles. So we'll be watching, and I'll keep you informed. And you, my dear friends, please subscribe to my channel. Please don't forget to like. Your comments are very important. I appreciate them and I read them. Take care of yourselves, and glory to Ukraine.